We've talked a lot about Underground Railroad agents saving slaves, but what about slaves saving Underground Railroad agents? Hi, my name is Jeremy, and welcome to Elwin Studios. Alexander Ross is a doctor from Canada who's inspired to join the Underground Railroad from a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. His first mission took place in 1857, and he was 24 years old at the time. But that doesn't mean that he was young and inexperienced and had no plan. His operations are pretty straightforward. He heads to the south, befriends a local slave owner, and then asks that slave owner to offer him a slave to help him go birdwatching or bird catching. And when he's finally alone with the slave, he talks to them about running away. He tells them about how Canada is and how freedom is. And then if they are interested in running, he gives them a compass, maybe a knife, maybe a gun, directions, and when and where to run. Also, who to trust. A certain mission to Columbus, Mississippi starts out pretty smoothly. Alexander meets a colonel who's a very brutal slave master, so it's no surprise that when Alexander meets a young slave who's very smart, that slave has no trouble in deciding that he wants to run away. Alexander provides his usual information and provisions and tells the slave to go running at night. But the slave wants to bring his brother along as well. Alexander doesn't see much harm in this and tells him to go tell his brother. But while eating at his hotel a bit later, Alexander is confronted by the colonel and a few of his neighbors. Apparently, the young slave had already run away and disappeared. Nobody knew where he was, but what's worse is that Alexander was the last person seen with him. It's clear that the only intention of these men is to kill Alexander very quickly and very quietly. His only hope is to stall for time and hope for a miracle. So he begs for a fair trial. Not that he has a lawyer or any witnesses or anybody on his side at all, or even a case. It is true that he helped this slave run away.
You're hopeless, Charlie Brown, completely hopeless.
The men, seeing that this was already an open and shut case, agreed, and put Alexander in a cell for the night. But he couldn't sleep. This was not because this was probably his last night, but because there were so many rats inside the bed that he wouldn't dare to lie down. And he also had to keep walking around just to make sure that the rats wouldn't bite at his feet or crawl up his leg. Morning finally came, and the crowd gathered to witness what was obviously a kangaroo trial. Alexander was waiting for his hanging, but then something happened. Outside there was a loud racket, and then in ran the young slave himself. The young slave turned to his master to beg for forgiveness and to give an explanation. He had gone to a neighboring plantation where his brother was living and working. Apparently, he was 8 miles away, and so when he went there, he told his brother about running away. But he didn't tell anybody else this. Then, on his way back, he sprained his ankle, and so he had to stay at his brother's plantation for a whole night and day. When he finally did come back, he found that everybody was at the courthouse about to kill a man for stealing him. So he ran over as quickly as he could. The judge, obviously embarrassed by the whole situation and how Alexander was a guest and how he was about to be murdered for something he had no involvement in, quickly released Alexander. Alexander took this opportunity to make the colonel promise that he would not punish the slave, seeing that the man owed him for treating him so poorly. And Alexander, on top of that, gave the young slave a reward. He gave him $20 in gold, which was a lot of money back then. He used this as a way of saying thank you to the slave for saving his life, but also secretly as a way of giving him provisions, more provisions than he already had, for him and his brother for their escape. Only a week after Alexander left, the young slave and his brother had collected enough food for a few days. Then they started heading north in the night, and after a couple weeks, they landed at the Ohio River. Then later, they went all the way to Canada. And so ends the story of a slave who helped an Underground Railroad agent, who helped the slave in turn. If you want to hear us tell you a story about your favorite agent of the Underground Railroad, you can put it in the comments below, and you can click on this video here to learn about Frederick Douglass's escape from slavery.